Lesson 12.1, Samples and Studies. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to take a little bit of a break from the algebra-based stuff we were doing before and the trig, and we're moving on to probability and statistics. So, in order to do that, we need to be able to classify and analyze samples and classify and analyze studies. So we're going to talk about what that is. So, because we're talking about a whole new topic and a new thing, there's a lot of vocabulary. So let's do vocabulary for section 12.1 on samples and studies. So pause the video and copy these down onto your note-taking guide. All right, so let's talk about what some of these vocabulary words are. So as you're going through this video, you should be trying to match the definition that I'm going to give you with that is on the sheet. So first thing we're talking about is population. So population is the whole set of possibilities within a certain study you want to study. So if, like, for example, here in this picture, we're saying how many people live in Arizona, your population is going to be the total number of people that live in Arizona. Okay? If, let's say, for example, that I want to know how many people believe in God. Now, I'm not going to interview all of those people that live in Arizona because that's going to be ridiculous and really hard to do. So you might take a sample, which is like a smaller amount of people within the thing. So, for example, here in this, they said out of 536,148 people, they surveyed 1,000 of them to get a better idea. So out of those 1,000, 80% believed. So that 1,000, that smaller subset of the bigger thing, of the whole population, is a sample. A simple random sample and a simple random sample, so when you're trying to find a sample, we're going to talk about different types of samples. So in a simple random sample, each member of the population has an equal chance of being selected as part of this sample. So, like, I'm not going to just pick certain specific people that I want to pick. It's just going to be completely random, and every single person in the population has the equal chance of being picked to be part of the sample. Okay? Another type of sample is a systematic sample. In a systematic sample, members are selected according to the specified interval and from a random starting point, such as selecting every third student. So if we're talking about picking students for a survey at a school, here they're going to say, okay, well, every third student that comes through the door, we're going to interview. That's a systematic sample. So, like, you just count every three. So you can see in this thing, we go 1, 2, 3, we're going to pick this person. 1, 2, 3, we're going to pick this person. 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, that is a systematic sample. If we have a self-selected sample, those are where the members volunteer to be included in the sample. So if they set up this, like, for example, this survey booth, the ones that come over and take the survey are going to be part of the sample. They self-selected, they chose to be part of it. Okay, so self-selected. The next is a convenience sample. So in a convenience sample, members that are readily available or easy to reach are selected. So for example, they might just, if a bus driver wants to know, he might just choose all of the students on his bus to interview for the survey. It's convenient for him because he's working with them, okay? All right, a stratified sample is the population is first divided into similar, non-overlapping groups. Members are then randomly selected from each group. So maybe you divide up into groups, and then from each group you take a few people. So for example, here with the high school, they have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And they chose 2 from each group randomly. That would be a stratified sample. Stratified. Yeah. Okay, so we want to be able to classify these and be able to say what kind of sample it is and what's the population and what is also a sample. So, for example here, every 5th person walking out of a movie theater is asked their name and their favorite type of movie. So what type of sample is this? And suggest a population, or identify the sample, not what type of sample. So the sample is the group of everybody being interviewed. So the sample is every 5th person. Okay, and then the every fifth person looking at movie theaters asked to name their favorite movie. Okay, the next thing we're looking for is the population. So the population, so not everybody's being interviewed, but who has the possibility of being interviewed? That's the population. So the population is going to be like all moviegoers. So everybody who went to the movie theater, or everybody in the movie theater, is the population. And then they're only asking from that group, that bigger group of the population, the sample is only every fifth person. Not ever, sorry. Anyway, okay? So then part B, they say classify the sample as simple, systematic, self-selected, convenience, or stratified. So in this example, because it was every fifth person, there was a system to it, it was systematic. That was a systematic sample. Okay? You guys figure out this one. Figure out what the sample is, what the population is, and what type of sample. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is biased and unbiased samples. So if you think about the word biased, like if somebody says that's so biased, that means they have like a favor. They're making their decision in favor of something. So we're going to basically be looking at these things, and we can think about these as being fair or unfair. Okay, so we're going to look at example 2. The student council surveys the students in one classroom and decided the theme for the spring dance. Is this sample going to be fair or unfair, basically? Is it biased or unbiased? So explain your reasoning. So in this case, the student council, they only chose students in one classroom. So maybe that classroom, they've all talked together and they've already influenced each other's decisions. They're close, they're maybe friends. So they might have an opinion different than every other classroom. So if you just pick one classroom and not random students from each classroom, then that's biased. So this is going to be a biased because the participants are not randomly selected. The sample selected is in one classroom. Okay? Next one. The Parent Association surveys the parents of every fifth student on the school roster to decide whether to hold a fundraiser. So they're just going through the roster of all the students in the school and just saying every fifth one. You think that's fair or unfair? Is that going to give you a good variety, or is it singling out students, certain students? So this is unbiased. So it's completely random. It seems fair. Okay, the parents are picked randomly and all have an equal chance of being picked. Okay, you guys determine whether this is biased or unbiased. Okay, the next thing that we're looking at is study types. So we have 3 types of doing a study: survey, observational study, or experiment. So in a survey, data is collected from responses given by a sample regarding their characteristics, behavior, or opinions. So you hand out a paper and you're asking people questions, or you're doing a questionnaire or something. Those are all surveys. Observational study. Members of a sample are measured or observed without being affected by the study. So there's nothing being changed to them. So like you're not giving them something new, you're not doing something to them, you're just observing things that they're naturally doing. Okay, an experiment is always divided into 2 groups. So there's an experimental group that undergoes a change and a control group that does not do anything, it just stays the same. And there's always only one thing that changes. If there's 2 things that change, then that's a biased experiment and it's not going to work. Okay, so we want to classify the different types of study techniques. So a retailer wants to evaluate their performance in customer service. They contact 1,000 random customers asking if they would complete an evaluation form. Determine whether a situation describes a survey, an observational study, or an experiment. Okay, explain your reasoning. They contact 1,000 random customers asking if they would complete an evaluation form. What does that sound like? To me, that sounds like a survey. So it's a survey because the data are gathered from responses given by members of the sample. Okay? The next one, researchers analyzed the reactions of rats to a vitamin. Determine whether this situation describes a survey, an observational study, or an experiment. Explain your reasoning. So they took some rats and they made a change. They're changing the makeup of those rats. So this is going to be an experiment. They probably have some other rats too that they're comparing it to. So they're just seeing the reaction when you apply the vitamin and when you don't apply the vitamin. So this is going to be an experiment. Rats that did not get the vitamin are a control group, and rats that got the vitamin are the experimental group. Okay? You guys try and determine this one. Okay, next thing we want to look at is biased or unbiased survey questions. So we want to see if these questions are fair or if they're basically leading the person who's responding to give a specific answer. Either that, those would be biased. Another biased question is if you're asking more than one thing at a time. Okay, so let's see. For this question, how often do you exercise? Does this question lead anybody to answer any specific way? The answer is no. So this is going to be an unbiased question. It does not encourage participants to answer in a certain way. It is clearly stated. Okay, the next one. Do you like basketball? If so, do you prefer watching high school, college, or professional? So, is this leading people to answer a certain way, or is it asking more than one thing at a time, or is it unclear? This is biased because it addresses more than one issue. Okay, so a survey question, if it's going to be unbiased, it should only ask one thing at a time. So you guys check this one and determine if this is biased or unbiased. Example 5, biased and unbiased experimental designs. So again, we want to check and see that our experiments are only changing one thing and we have a control group and an experimental group, okay? If there's more than one thing that's changing in between them, then it's a biased experiment, okay? It's going to lead your answer to come out one way rather than the other. So, a baseball bat manufacturer wants to test a new group on their bats. They select 75 high school baseball players to try out the bat with the new grips and 75 other players to try out the old grips. Identify the experiment as biased or unbiased. If biased, explain your reasoning. So this one's going to be biased because the members of the control group and the experimental group are not randomly selected. They chose just 75 high school students to play. They didn't say they chose them randomly. So if this is going to be unbiased, it has to be completely random, which this was not. Okay, you guys say if this is biased or unbiased, this experiment. Alrighty, that is the end of section 12.1. I know this section had a lot of vocabulary, but hopefully you guys picked up on it and you got those vocabulary sheets filled out and you're somewhat understanding. If you have any questions, we'll go over it in class. All right, bye. Sorry for my voice.